Taken from the 1967 Edgar Rice Burroughs Tarzan Annual. I read for you The Beasts of Pal Ul Don. Author unknown. At a deep channel in the great swamp, Tarzan prepared to feed his giant pet Argus, the eagle. Holding a three-pronged spear, he stood patiently on the rock at the edge of the water, watching, waiting. Then suddenly, in he dived. For a few moments there was no sign of him. Then he emerged, bearing aloft on the spear a huge catfish. "Creop!" croaked the great bird, as it took the food in its great beak and carried it to a rock to eat at leisure. As Tarzan climbed out of the water, Nkima, Tarzan's monkey friend, came swinging down from the treetops, full of mischief. "Tarzan, look! Tarzan, look!" he jabbered. As Tarzan swung around in response, Nkima hurled an overfresh plumberry, large and juicy, which caught Tarzan right between the eyes. "Rascal!" shouted Tarzan. "You need a good lesson. A good ducking will quieten you down." "No, no, no!" Nkima cried in mock alarm. Nkima was only fooling, but Tarzan wouldn't hear or look at Nkima. Tarzan would only talk with that ugly mountain of feathers. Just listen to him again. "Yep, yep, Cree," Argus was saying plaintively. "Still hungry? What an appetite!" The big catfish had gone, and Argus was asking for more. In Tarzan dived to find one. Finding fish was no difficulty in these waters. It was merely a matter of picking the right one for his needs. Slowly he swam in pursuit of another catfish. Then, swish! A strange, elongated head and two massive jaws swept past him, and the jaws closed on the fish. But what? It wasn't a crocodile. Tarzan came quickly to the surface to stare in astonishment at the creatures which were suddenly invading the great swamp. That great head that had swept past him in the water was that of a Coronosaurus, a saw-toothed prehistoric beast. These were animals from the Valley of Monsters. What could they be doing here? "Cree!" cried Argus, suddenly flying from the rock where it had been awaiting more food, and Tarzan saw the cause of its alarm, a duck-billed dinosaur. He heard strange trumpeting, and swinging round saw another terrifying sight, a Garth rushing headlong along the shore, chased by a massive tyrannosaur. "Tarzan! Tarzan! Save Nkima!" cried the little monkey. "Shh, Nkima! Jump down to me," Tarzan said quietly, and in a moment the monkey was safe on his shoulder. Argus required no orders, and he was keen to get away as anyone. In a moment, Tarzan and his own passenger were astride the great bird's back, and they were winging away. Tarzan was filled with curiosity. Something had happened in the Valley of Monsters, and just what that something was, he was determined to find out. He urged Argus on, pointing his course towards the incredible place where life remained as it had been for thousands of years. Long before they were able to distinguish from cloud the pall of smoke that lay above the valley, Tarzan had detected the smell of it. And now, as they came nearer, he saw that the sky was red with the reflected flames. Smoke poured as though funneled from several volcanoes. Once again there had been an eruption in the Valley of Monsters, which defied description. The reign of terror among the great beasts must have been something dreadful to contemplate. Right across the valley ran wide streams of molten earth, in which he could clearly see the beasts had been trapped and had died. The Valley of Monsters was a place of desolation. It had begun the inferno that had begun days ago. How many giant reptiles had been driven from this haven into the outer world? Tarzan was pondering these questions, and he headed swiftly towards Cathni, the city of gold. He had turned that way immediately, and he observed what had happened in the Valley of the Monsters, for he knew his duty was quite plain. He must warn King Jathon and his people to stay away from the swamp. A keen wind had risen, and Inkima, still on Tarzan's shoulder, cried impatiently, "Faster! Faster! Faster! The black cloud is catching us up!" And indeed, following close behind them now came the choking mass of the smoke from the eruption of the Valley of Monsters, and Argus, conscious of its evil presence, sped ever faster. At last, ahead of them, Tarzan saw the magnificent city of Cathni. Its magnificent towers, glittering palaces, were always for him one of the most magnificent of sights. But today there was something more to see, which exceeded his greatest fears. Below him, in rough procession, was a migration of reptiles heading for the city he knew and loved so well, and at the head Pterodons riding on armoured griffs. "On, Argos, on!" Tarzan cried, and the wonder bird put on extra speed. As Tarzan sailed down out of the sky, King Jathon himself had hurried to the tallest tower with a group of his warriors. He had seen the distant smoke. He had his garrison put in a state of preparedness. "Tarzan!" he shouted, grasping his head warmly. "There is danger to the city." "More than you realize, King Jathon," said Tarzan, looking back to the approaching array of beasts. "But what are these monsters, and where do they come from?" the king asked. "They have been driven by volcano and earthquake from the valley they have inhabited since long before men came to the regions. These ape-like beasts who ride the fiercest of reptiles are known as Pterodons. They are ruthless killers. Clear but all your armed guards from the city walls." But already the Pterodons had struck. Like a living battering ram, one of the biggest griffs had smashed a breach in the city wall. The arrows of the defenders of Cathni streamed through the air, but against the griffs with carcasses as tough as crocodile skin, they made not the slightest impression. "Tarzan, how can we fight such beasts?" King Jathon asked. "With fire and torches and oil." As Tarzan's voice rang out, the soldiers sped to do his bidding. Soon men were hurrying with lighted torches, and Tarzan, carrying a large urn full of oil, cried, "Follow me!" Below, the griffs that had battered the hole in the city wall were still crashing its stone-hard walls and skulls against the rock-like structure to widen it sufficiently to allow their fat bodies through, when Tarzan called out, "Now, Jathon, your torch!" "Krieger, ah!" cried the startled Pterodons, as the torch on which Tarzan had poured more oil came blazing down. The torch landed between the great griff's eyes, doing little real harm, but terrifying the brute so that it reared madly. It threw off its rider. Then, as if its wits had been scared out of it, it turned and ran away as fast as its short legs could carry it. King Jathon and his men needed only this one example, and they quickly imitated Tarzan's action. On all sides the flaming torches streamed down on the griffs, some of which did not even wait to be driven away by the fearful fire weapons. The bellows of the first fire-crazed griff had filled them with dismay, when to them was added the bedlam created by others who were experiencing the ordeal by fire. It was sufficient to make quite a few of them run away before they were hurt. Very soon all the griffs were retreating, and the Pterodons with them. "They will be back." "Tarzan?" the king asked. "Probably. Their thick hides and armour keep them from being hurt much. Our victory was largely psychological, but I am afraid they are creatures of little brain power, and their memory is short. No, I fear they will return. They will come back, and because they are hungry. For this breed of griffs and the Torridons who ride them are eaters of flesh. Flesh-eaters? Yes. Well, thanks to you, we have at least the chance to repair our city wall. True enough, but that still does not spell safety, Jathon. We shall create more experts with our fire defences. Jathon said earnestly. We shall prepare even bigger torches and soak them well before they are lighted. Tarzan did not reply immediately, and Jathon saw his troubled look. There is other danger? Yes. There are even more terrible monsters than the griffs, who have come from the far valley. I saw one of them in the swamp today. A garth. A what? Tarzan led him to a nearby wall, and with a piece of charcoal drew to him what was a familiar figure, the figure of one of the most dangerous of the prehistoric beasts. As he drew it, he explained, "Here you have a head, something like the head of a cow, but without horns. And there you have two great jaws, filled with massive teeth. And there is this long neck, which is nearly a yard in diameter. And here the shoulders, not very much wider than the thick big man. Here we have arms, fairly short, giving the creature finger-like claws. The shoulders may not look very impressive, but it is the power in the hips that give the beast its main strength. The body swirls on the hips, which you see are quite tremendous. The thighs are all muscle, and the legs are built like oak trees. They are very tall. They average about 12 feet, but I have seen many of 20 feet or more. It is said that some are known to grow to 30 feet. Then we are lost. Are there no weapons we can make? No, not in the time. And the fire weapon, do they not fear it? It would help, but the Garths are much more intelligent than the Griffs. They are almost as impervious to ordinary weapons too. They would no doubt catch the torches and fling them back at us." Tarzan suddenly let out a whistle, and with a screech Argus came sailing towards him. Tarzan leapt on his back. "There is a tribe of strange men who live in the mountains above the Valley of Monsters. They have fought the Garths before. Yes. Then I will find the men of Jonah, if they still live. Until then, good luck, Jathon. Good hunting, Tarzan." But before Tarzan could leave, there came a shrill cry. "Tarzan! Tarzan! Wait for Enkima!" "Come then, little one," Tarzan replied, and Enkima leapt from a tower onto his shoulder, and the three sailed from the sky. The air was clearing as Tarzan rode the skies. Evidently the volcanoes had now spent themselves, and calm had descended on the Valley of Monsters. But what of the men of Jorah? Had Jorah's tribe too been dispersed by the stampeding of the monsters? When soon he reached the country of the Jorah tribe, the tough little warriors who went bare-chested into battle, each wearing the round fur cap that distinguished them from other tribes in the valley, they had gone. Tarzan came down low, looking for the tracks of the Dials, the ostrich-like but short-necked giants amongst birds, which the Jorah warriors rode at tremendous speed into battle. Soon he found traces, and following flew them for many miles, until at last he spied the men he sought. At his approach, the men swiftly surrounded their migrating women and children and prepared for battle. But Tarzan called out, "Have no fear, friends of Jorah! It is I, Tarzan!" Tarzan brought Argus down beside their chief, who called out, "Tarzan, it is our great friend." "Well met, Jorah," Tarzan replied. "I feared for your lives." "We had cause to fear too. Your whole tribe is moving because of the fire mounting. We have no choice. Thick, hot ashes rain from the sky, blanketing all our country. Without these great birds which you taught us to ride, we could hardly have survived. Mount and ride with us, dear friend." A dial was being led forward, and Tarzan gave Argus an affectionate farewell and mounted the new steed. Jorah pointed forward. "The country ahead seems to be a good place to make our home. There is running water and plenty of wood for fires." Tarzan said solemnly, "It would be, but the beasts from the Valley of Monsters have taken it over. They have fled the fire mounting, and all living things flee from them." Jorah's jaw set firm. "We do not fear for them. On our dials we have fought even mighty griffs, and even escaped the leaping Goths. We will do battle with them, just as you have trained us to fight." "It will be a great task," Tarzan reminded them. "Our job will not be to fight them in the hope of driving them away, but possibly to kill them, for they do not scare easily." "If it is a fight to the death, then so be it," said Jorah. "There is even more to it," Tarzan told him. "The people of Cathni lie under threat from the beast men. First they were attacked by Toradons on their armoured griffs, and we beat off the first wave. Now at any minute they will return to the attack. The only hope for the people of Cathni is for the Toradons to be attacked by another force. Yours." "And so it shall be," said Jorah, and with a cry, a fierce war cry, he urged his dial forward in the van of the attack. Argus came sweeping down, unsure of what Tarzan wished him to do. "Fly back to Cathni, Argus. They'll feed you. Wait for me there." Tarzan was aware that the sight of Argus without him on his back might strike fear into the hearts of the men of Cathni. Where was Tarzan? But he would not be long behind to reassure them. Hours later, as darkness fell, they were in sight of the walls of Cathni, but up to now there had been no sight or sound of the griffs, nor indeed any sign of the monsters of the valley. "It is strange," Jorah mused. "Yes, and not so strange. They are cunning beasts, and they have had to fight, and they did not know or did not like it. They will get their own back, but they will do it cunningly." Tarzan looked around, and he observed that the lookouts had taken up their positions. Now they proceeded to wait, sitting patiently on the motionless dials. At length there came from one of the lookouts a vulture's call, and they turned at his signal to see it pointing into the distance. Jorah motioned for him to come down and report, and the lookout landed at their feet by a nearby tree. There on the right, he pointed, and just dimly in the moonlight they saw a dark mass of objects moving towards the city wall. "They are proceeding to close formation," he cried. "Evidently they are relying on weight of numbers to crash the city wall." Tarzan said quietly, "Thank goodness we have arrived in time." "We attack now?" Jorah asked. "At once," Tarzan replied. And now the peace of the moonlit night was shattered by the most awe-inspiring sounds of the preliminaries of battle. "Oh-hee! Oh-hee!" cried the excited warriors, and the speeding dials added to the din with their own peculiar war cry. "Aurk! Aurk! Aurk!" Almost at once the noise was amplified by the startled gruntings of the griffs and the bellowing consternation of the Toradons. Nearer the men of Jorah went with Tarzan at their head, and already the Toradons had halted. The attack on the walls of Cathni, which had been so imminent a moment ago, was halted. Then, seeing nothing more alarming than an attack by the little men riding big birds, the Toradon leader let out a great bellow of derision and urged his fellow creatures to attack. But it took only a few minutes to discover how deceptive was the appearance of the Jorahs. A few minutes in which the Toradons learned, to their cost, that brute strength means nothing against the tactics of men of intelligence and the discipline of well-trained fighters. Tarzan had taught the men of Jorah that since they were small, their only hope of survival lay in their tactics. Thus he had helped them to train the dials not only as their means of transport, but also the main force in their attack. The feet of the dial were hard and strong, and Tarzan had noted on first inspecting the bird that in anger it bunched the foot like a fist and struck out with it. Here then was the answer, one which the clever Jorahs could simply exploit. But it must be exploited scientifically, and this was the part of the training which Tarzan spent many hours imparting to the warriors. They in turn spent months perfecting what Tarzan had shown them, that the blows of the dial's right foot must always connect with the most vulnerable part of the anatomy of whatever it was they were fighting. They must learn just where those parts were in the various animals they might encounter. And now, at this moment, all this training was being put into effect, and how effective it was. Tarzan knew that the weakest point in the case of the Guths was at the very point of their nose. And now on every hand the dial were rearing into the air, bringing their right fist down with a terrific bonk on the end of the nearest available griff's nose. "Cree!" cried Tarzan, and "Gawk!" cried the dials, while the noises came from the pain-filled gruffs was indescribable. Equally the pterodons were in trouble. True, in some cases their heavy clubs, swinging in blind all around, caused casualties amongst the dials and joras alike. But for them there was nothing they could do against the fists that came through the air with tremendous speed and caught them either in the solar plexus or on the side of the head or on the point of the jaw. Right, left, and centre, pterodons went down as though poleaxed. The battle did not last long. For the pterodons and the griffs, when their slow brains started to understand that they were up against a superior force, always ran, and now run they did. A great cheer came from the walls of Cathni, and the gates were opened wide. "The city of gold welcomes you and your people," the king of Cathni cried out in triumph. The men of Jorah followed, and Tarzan came through the city gate. "Now we are all safe. We shall prepare a great feast and celebrate the friendship of our two peoples," the king said. Tarzan stepped forward. "It is easy to say that we are safe, Jathon, but there are other threats. The wind brings the scent of Garths, and though we know the great beasts of the Valley of Monsters may band together to destroy us, for I have said they are flesh-eaters and they are hungry, then it is good that there are more of us to fight them." Tarzan shook his head. "I fear it is beyond fighting. If they come all together to attack, we will never survive. We need a new strategy. But how is such a thing possible?" "I don't know yet. Not exactly. I have an idea, and it may work. Come, Jorah." "But us?" "No, we stay here except we two. If we do not return within half a day, then prepare to withstand a long siege." As they rode away, Jorah said, "It would seem a strange thing to expect of a man, Tarzan, that he and you, just we two, should go together to fight such a mighty problem. But you have honoured me to ask you, and I am in your hands. Can you tell me your plan? It is just an idea, but I think it would work. If you would only lead them to war on each other, we might achieve our purpose." Less than an hour later, they came upon a herd of Garths. The excited and angry "Gah-honk! Gah-honk!" which came from them suggested a row, and just as Tarzan and Jorah approached, they saw some of them were fighting over the remains of a carcass of a lone buffalo. "There may be time for us to find a band of griffs," said Tarzan eagerly. "Come." They made for the forest nearby, and then they entered, and Tarzan said, "The griffs and the pterodons are in here. Their scent is plain. Oho! Pterodons! Oho! Cowards, come and fight!" Jorah sensed the point of this and added his voice to the noise, and soon they heard the lumbering sound of the griffs approaching, and heard the inhuman battle cry of the pterodons. "Wait now!" cried Tarzan, as they raced from the forest with the pterodons in pursuit. "Not too fast. Give the griffs a chance," Tarzan advised. "How they shake the ground!" "The ground will shake even more if we manage to pit them with the Garths. Turn a little. We will lead them straight to our friends." They breasted a little rise, and there, charging towards them, came the Garths. "Escape!" Tarzan just managed to cry, and the wonderful Dials found themselves with a well-nigh impossible task, for they were no longer birds in the sense of making use of their wings. Nevertheless, the crisis gave them even greater agility than usual. Tarzan's dial leapt high into the air and sprang from the head of an advancing Garth to soar away past them, while Jorah's men ran so fast between the lumbering beasts that none had the slightest chance to stop him. It was as Tarzan had predicted. The Garths and the pterodons met in a headlong clash, and the battle was terrible to see, an awe-inspiring sight. And at last it was all over, and on this particular plot, at any rate, peace reigned again. "A savage business," cried Tarzan, but only in the way that we can meet and survive the Pull Aldon. It was at this moment that Argos came down out of the sky. Yes, said Tarzan, it is time to go. But the feast! Enjoy it, and give my regards to King Jathon along with my apologies. But I cannot rest until I have scoured the land for more monsters. For while they are loose from the Valley of Monsters, none will be safe. That was taken from the Tarzan Annual of Edgar Rice Burroughs, 1967. My name is Owen Staton. I thank you for listening. If you wish to donate or buy me a Ko-fi, go to kofi.com/Owen Staton, or become a member of my Patreon at patreon.com/Owen Staton 7. Thank you for listening to these old stories. Diolch yn fawr.